Applying for a home loan can be sometimes invasive. Lenders ask a lot of questions to get you qualified for a mortgage. Now, the number one thing you don't want to do is lie to a lender, because trust me, we will find out more often than not, and we'll get to the bottom of it, and it could literally cost you a deal, cost you money, and it just wastes a ton of time for everybody. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the top things that you shouldn't lie to your lender about in your application. The number one thing you don't want to lie about is being married. Here in Nevada, we're a community property state. So if you're applying for any sort of government financing like FHA or VA, we have to take into account your spouse's debt. When you qualify for the mortgage, let's just say the husband is going to go on the loan and the wife's not, we still have to pull the wife's credit. We're not going to use her score as any part of the qualification. However, we have to take into account all of her debt. So the husband has to qualify for his debt on his credit report, plus her debt as well. I've seen people with over 10 credit cards. And if your wife has a lot of debt, that could literally kill the deal, or vice versa. So make sure you disclose that up front. I've had clients that they've been separated from their spouse for years. But guess what? If you're still legally married, I have to take into account your spouse's debt. I don't care if you haven't talked to your spouse in 10 years. If you're legally married, you're legally married. We have to take that into account. So tip number one, if you are still legally married and you guys do not talk or get along and you're planning on buying a house, make sure you get some kind of separation or divorce going. If not, in a community property state like Nevada, it could bite you in the butt. And speaking of still being married and not disclosing that to the lender, I actually had a client one time that did not tell us that they were married. And right before we were about to close, something popped up that notified us that he was still legally married. So what we had to do was I had to personally call the wife and ask to pull her credit. Of course, she was upset. She didn't want to do anything to help him buy a house because now this guy's moved on with someone else, but it was part of the process. And luckily, she was willing and able to let us pull her credit as part of the qualification in order for him to buy a house. So when it comes to that whole separation thing, if you guys are still legally married, please remember, if you're buying in a community property state, the lender will ask about your spouse's credit. Another thing you want to avoid not telling your lender is about your down payment. Now, I've talked about in other videos that cash is a big no-no. So let's say when your lender is doing your application, you say, hey, I've got $50,000 in the bank. But when you give your bank statement to your lender to do your pre-approval, you only have maybe a couple $1,000. If you have the rest of that money sitting in cash at home, or maybe it's coming from a friend, or they're going to be gifting you the money, the lender needs to know that up front. We can't wait to the end of the transaction to source your down payment. That's one of the number one things that can hold up a deal and kill a deal at the same time. So be upfront about where your money is. Like I've said in other videos too, if it's in cash or maybe you're getting a gift, communicate that to your lender so we can best give you some advice and some guidance as to what needs to take place in order to get that money in your account so we can use it for your purchase. Another thing you want to be truthful about with your lender is your occupancy. A lot of times if you're looking online on Instagram or some of these social media platforms, you have a lot of these real estate investors that are telling you how to house hack. And they're going to tell you you purchase a home with FHA financing or as little money down as possible, and then you're turning it into a rental. Now you have to be careful when you do that, because if you're literally telling the lender I'm going to move into the house and you don't move into it and you turn it into a rental, that's actually fraud. You're lying to the lender about your occupancy. And that's one thing you definitely don't want to do. And a lot of people got into trouble doing that back in the day during the whole foreclosure crisis. So don't lie about your occupancy. If you say you're going to move into the home, make sure you move into the home. What you decide to do in the future, if you decide to rent it a year from now, that's totally fine. But if you say you're going to move into it and you don't, just to rent it out, that's something you definitely want to avoid. Another thing you want to be truthful about is your employment situation. Now, with COVID and everyone moving around, leaving jobs, starting new jobs, you want to communicate that to your lender, because we need to make sure that you are employed so that way you can purchase your home. I've had situations in the past where clients quit their job or they put in their 2 weeks notice without telling anybody. If that's something that's going to be coming up, again, communicate that to your lender. We have to be on the same page so that way we can help you get into your home. If you don't tell us that you put in a 2 weeks notice and you still got another 3 weeks before you close on your mortgage, guess what? You're probably not going to get that house unless you got another job lined up. So just be cognizant of your employment situation. If there's going to be any sort of change, make sure you talk to your loan officer about that so they can best help you out. So that wraps up the video. That's some of the most common things that I've come across about people lying that we've been able to uncover during the mortgage process. So if you're thinking about buying, remember, just be upfront and honest with your lender. It's only going to save you time and heartache in the future to make sure that you can get in your home. And as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Hit the bell so every time we drop a new video, you get notified of it. And I will see you on the next one.